Good morning, everybody. I hope you're well. Welcome to my 7-week writing challenge. It's day number 10. My name's Hannah Velton. I'm a grief healer, writer, and speaker. And this morning's writing session was all about connection. So I do a meditation every morning before I start work, and I say a little prayer so that whatever comes through me will essentially be helping other people. So generally I don't feel Christian around me. I know he's there, he's in my heart, he's always there, we have that clear connection. But this morning in the meditation, he was right there as an energy field. It's like a solid energy field on my left hand side, and I could lean against him, which was really lovely. He's, especially after yesterday, and we're getting deeper and deeper into the story, and a lot of what I'm talking about now is actually healing him and our ancestors. And that's I'm only becoming aware of that in the last few days. I've known all this before, and I've worked through certain elements of it, but now it's really, I can see like the really big picture of our story and how it's going to help others. And, by telling the story, how it's going to touch others, and also the work that I can do with individuals, it's becoming clear that actually I'm going to be focusing my private work on, it's almost like people who are in power, in positions of real responsibility for others. And I think I've had lots of dreams about this over the years, and I've never really kind of seen how I could possibly be working with these kind of people. But actually it's the people in power, like the lawmakers, policymakers, politicians, people at the top of industry, of social care, of teaching, nurse, all these kinds of people where they have responsibility for a lot of people's well-being. And I think as I've worked through my grief, I've become very aware that you're only really able to help other people from a completely unconditional level when you yourself are healed. I don't know about counselling and social work and stuff. You need to have gone through a certain level of counselling yourself. And actually, now we're talking about that, when I was at university, I did a Nightline counselling course. And that was for, actually this links nicely in, it was for people who were having a bad time while they were at uni, and we were there on the end of the phone line to essentially allow them to let their emotions out and to speak to somebody in confidence. And actually, so that was at university, and then also I got into ghostwriting memoirs for people. The inspiration was actually Christian going missing in 2003, and I started to really think about the story that I'd lost from him. We didn't, Christian and I were, as I said yesterday, we were incredibly close as kids, and then he got taken to a different school and got into the public school system, boarding school system. And from then on, I felt I lost a lot of his story. We didn't share as much. We used to write together. We used to write letters all the time and emails as emails became popular. But I guess I didn't know his day-to-day goings on and a lot of the things he did. I've heard about now from his friends, but I didn't know really at the time. And when somebody dies early, and you don't get the opportunity to get their life story. I see it all the time. You just want to, you think like, why didn't I ask them when they were alive? Why didn't, this story is lost. I'm never going to know now about this and that, and what their grandparents were like. The whole family story. There's often somebody in families who is known as the history keeper, the story keeper, and when they die, the family history goes, and it's only if they've left a record or people have been bothered to ask them, because stories carry on down the generations. You have to keep stories alive, you have to keep memories alive. But anyway, I started doing ghostwriting of memoirs because we had lost Christian's story, or so I thought. And I got our dad's story down first, just to see if it could be done. And actually, that's why I know a lot about our ancestral past on the paternal side that I was talking about yesterday. So as a ghostwriter, I've had a history of being a journalist and getting stories down for many years. But this was different because your people allow you into their lives. It's such a privileged position, and I really, really loved being a ghostwriter. But it was more that people would trust you with their story, and they would tell you their stuff they'd never told anybody else. And actually, in every single case, the people who came to me actually had some real releasing to do, and it freed them up. I could see it. I could see these people rising and blossoming and finding new purpose in life and new directions to take. It was amazing work. But I also heard stories that I wasn't prepared necessarily to hear. I hadn't done any counselling qualifications or anything, but it was essentially like being a counsellor. But instead of suggesting things and mentoring somebody, I was actually just listening and recording the story and crafting their story into a book. So I was counselling of a sorts, but a lot of it's like we kind of think we're all alone with our stories and our hurts and abandonments, but actually the simple act of telling somebody your story immediately creates a connection. And during those years I was a ghostwriter, I developed a real compassion actually for and empathy, which maybe I hadn't had before, for people who had really bravely and courageously overcome fears, difficulties. There were quite a few people who lost their parents early. There were people who had lost trust in their parents and everything that they believed in. Oh yeah, so many different stories. But really, if you drill down, I suppose, to every story, it was based in abandonment of some description. And as time went on, I became fully aware that my grief was based in abandonment, and that abandonment had not happened necessarily when Christian had gone missing. It had actually happened a lot earlier when he'd been taken away to a different school. It wasn't his fault. It was part of what every boy in the family for generations past had been, that was their path in life. And having talked to Christian many times about this is nothing new. I think we can all feel, if we're honest, like that feeling of abandonment, and it could have happened with parents, with siblings, with friends, with school, with just general society, being suddenly told you can't do that, or that pit of the stomach kind of feeling that you're all alone and nobody else is, you're defenseless and nobody's listening to you. You can't be heard, your voice can't be heard. And I think that happens to everybody at some stage in their lives. And the writing this morning was about that. The actual question, the first question was, what breaks your heart? So what breaks my heart? And the thing that really breaks my heart, and I have to really shield myself from it, is there's two things. Is when I hear a child in distress. I can feel it now. My body goes into I can feel it now. It's like such a visceral reaction. Even if you just hear it in the supermarket, or I hear it. We have 2 pubs near us, and I remember one night just hearing a child going up the street with his dad, and he was in distress, and I had to run out and say something, because I couldn't stand it. Christian, I do feel I get that from Christian more. So it's become more and more. When Christian was alive, he worked with lots of children. Over the time. I said in the film yesterday that kids were always really attracted to Christian, and his work, if he had really lived his truth, would have been working with children and helping distressed children. And he would take himself off. He would be, there were times when his friends would, think, oh, what's happened to Christian? And he would take himself off. And through experiences he had young at boarding school, and I've talked about this yesterday, about he would get angel visitations, and when he was little at school, he started to get these little angel children that would come and sit with him and keep him company. And as he got older, he would start doing that for children in distress. I can't quite explain it to you now, but he would get called and he would go still and take himself away from the noise around him, and he would connect in with a distressed child, and he would be able to sit with them and calm them. So in other words, he became somebody else's angel. I have taken on that now, and I find it incredibly difficult. The other thing that I find breaks my heart is any cruelty to animals. Again, I don't have quite, well, I do. I get that feeling in my stomach. I get it's like a real visceral anger of like the defenseless being taken advantage of, or being ignored, or being hurt. And it's often hurt people hurt other people. That's just the way it is. And I think a lot of what I can do now, this was the other part of the writing challenge, what can you do now about it? I'm in a fortunate position now, having lived through a traumatic experience and kind of come out the other side. I'm now in a position to use my voice. If you noticed yesterday, I was really touching my throat, and like what I was talking about was really hard for me to talk about, but the more I do it, the easier it becomes. And I have a voice, I have all the experience. I have to now start talking. I've had so many fears about this, but if I don't stand up now, I'm never going to, and this will all be wasted. So, as I was saying, like hurt people. You can see it. Unfortunately, it's getting more and more in our faces. People, you can see it everywhere, and I think this lockdown has brought out like a real sense of. I think, like if we're talking about abandonment and loneliness and being in lockdown and actually realising and having to sit with those feelings is incredibly difficult. And, when Christian went missing, I didn't want to sit with those feelings at all. I drank a lot. I worked a lot, anything to distract myself. But actually in lockdown, it's been really difficult to distract yourself in a lot of ways. So I think we're seeing a real build-up of anxiety and people trying really hard to block what is coming up for them. And it's spilling out. People haven't got the usual ways of expressing themselves, going out and being around other people and losing themselves in something other than their lives and what they are actually dealing with. So anyway, this is the time I have to do this. I when lockdown first started, and I was very aware of lots of grief going on and all these funerals that couldn't, people couldn't visit gravesides and go through the normal mourning rituals. I had a real feeling I've got to do something. I've got to be showing voice, talking now and actually using my voice and helping people. But I never kind of got the opportunity to do that. And it was actually Christian who told me, it's actually too noisy at the moment, Han. People aren't going to hear what you say because everyone was talking about, do this, do that. These spiritual leaders were standing up and saying, do this, do that, and I'll talk you through all these things. And if I'd attempted to do these films, for example, or do whatever I was going to do, write, or it would have just got lost in that noise. But actually, now is the time to start talking about this as people come out and come back into normal life. Because a lot of people will just try and get on with normal life, but actually those people that I want to reach and are waiting to hear me step forward, they're the ones who actually have gone, actually I have been listening to this abandonment, this fear, this pain, this grief, and I really want to do something about it now. I am not prepared to carry on in my normal life denying it or dampening it down or hurting other people. It's just, it now has to stop. And I got to that point as well. I was given all the signs, I was given all the callings. I think we talked about them in early films, until I got to the point where it was made perfectly obvious to me that I had to do something about my grief. And it was actually what was happening to my children. I've talked about that before in an earlier film as well. We feed as parents and children. They look up to us. They feed off our energy. We are the responsible ones. I was not being responsible. I was sitting in my grief cage, and being a victim. I was not taking responsibility. I have to be honest, I wasn't. And Christian, actually, I did all the films I did with Christian, which are all on my website. In the 7th film we did, Christian gave me a list. Actually, you can see it on a poster behind me on the wall, that grey poster. There's actually 17 lessons for 17 years up there. But when we did the film, it was 16 lessons for the 16 years that he'd been missing. So it was basically, he told me everything that he'd learnt and what was important to him, and how his life lessons, I guess, from what he'd been through in the physical, and now what he knows from his perspective in spirit. And one of the things, number 6, is, I wrote it down because I wasn't going to keep turning around. So number 6 of Christian's life lessons, which he told me after he died, obviously. Number 6 is, love the children, keep them in wonder, keep them innocent. They teach us the world as it should be. They are all in the light to begin with. Then they find themselves pulled and guided by adults into darkness. Let them stay in the light. So it's like, it's our responsibility as adults. And as, as I said earlier, I do see my role now as working with people who are in positions of responsibility for others. That's only come like this morning at about 5:30 in the morning, as these things do. But once a thought and a focus has been given to me, I'm going to run with it. And it's the right time for me to hear this. I had a very general, and that's my private work, okay? In terms of reaching everybody and the sort of universal lessons that our story has. We're obviously going to write the book, which is the focus of why I'm doing these films. We've already got the Lost and Found book, which is all about that building yourself up and the self-love and so you can build yourself up ready to get out of your grief cage. But we also have this community which we're working on called Raise, which is going to take people through all sorts of courses, and so that's going to be very general, virtual retreats, I guess, for people. So that's if they want to kind of work with us, but on a not on a one-to-one basis. So yeah, my focus is, as personal, is going to have to be on the people in power, because people in power cannot be hurt individuals in their grief cages, spilling all their hurt onto other people, which you can see happening everywhere. And breathe. And the other thing I just wanted to say, that the importance of connection. By telling our story, or me using my voice and telling our story, I've seen the power of it already. And at the time I didn't know, I wasn't ready. I didn't know, I wasn't healed enough to be able to then help other people. And actually there's a charity that I was involved with, and I did a missing people charity, and they asked me to read out a letter that I'd written to Christian at their Christmas concert, and this was back in 2017. It was up in London, up in the church that's next to Trafalgar Square. Amazing church. It's like an old chapel with balconies all around. And at that point in 2017, I'd done all the social media search for Christian, which had failed. I had my break up. I wouldn't call it a breakdown because it's a break up. You kind of break up and then you can then start rebuilding. So I'd done all my sort of lost the things I go through in Lost and Found. I'd found myself, I'd grounded myself, I'd cleared a lot of gunk away from me, lots of energy that wasn't productive. I'd basically balanced and grounded myself, ready to fly out of this grief cage. So Christian and I, by the time I'd written this letter, we'd actually met as eagles in spirit. So we'd actually met as our souls. And I knew that Christian and I had made this connection, and it was only going to be a matter of time before we could actually make the physical connection in this physical world. That was my thinking at the time. We were both still thinking he was going to come home. He thought he was still alive. Anyway, so this letter that I read out in this church, and I was actually a member. No, I wasn't a member of Missing. I went on to become a member of the Missing People Choir. I didn't last very long in it for reasons which will. I think I've already sort of talked about the reasons. Really, it was the mixing of an energies. That fear and grief was energy that I was around was too much. I was in I'd kind of moved out of that, and I didn't want to keep being in that mix. But anyway, I read this letter out to Christian, which was full of love, and I was basically saying, come back when you're ready. I'm ready to help you. I'm here for you. And when after reading out this letter, I was really nervous before doing it, but I managed to get the letter out without breaking my voice too much. And when I sat down, I literally shook for 5 minutes. I couldn't stop myself from shaking. And I now know that when you speak a truth and you voice it, the power of it, I can feel my body now going, the power of it is so strong. That's why words are so important. What you project and give out to the world. It's so important to watch what you're saying, to watch your thoughts, to like all that, the fearful thoughts and the grief and the hurt. It's like it's so easy to just flow out without being checked. But anyway, so my love that I was pouring out to Christian, it was just so strong. And I know there's people in the audience who reacted in very different ways actually to what I said, and picked up different energies from me, which was really interesting. But when we had the after drinks and after meal, a lot of the families there, the people who'd lost siblings, came up to me and talked to me a lot, and it was almost like a release, until you realise other people are in the same boat as you, until you hear somebody speak about it and you think, oh my God, that's how I feel, or that's my experience. You think you're alone and actually coping with it on your own, but there's so many people out there that are dealing with, in from our case, sort of missing people or grief, or an impossible to heal grief, things that you wish you'd said, like with the life stories, I wish I'd asked them about this, I wish we'd sorted out our differences and things. You can do all of that, but you can't do it physically. You can do it spiritually. But anyway, like, I realised other siblings would come up to me and say, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. When you have a missing person or you have a grief, it's often the focus is on the parents. Oh, poor parents, and, they must, all of that. Obviously, it's awful for parents, it's awful for everybody, but it's sometimes the case that the siblings get missed, especially if there's been a traumatic, if your sibling has had a traumatic end. There's a lot of guilt, of grief, of anger, of yearning, of longing. And, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? I've helped quite a few people. Christian brings me people. I call it my apprenticeship, but while I was initially helping people, Christian was bringing me people. He was attracting people to me to help, and a lot of them were siblings, sisters and brothers of siblings who'd taken their own lives. And I could feel them, once you've been through something like that, you move from a sort of empathy for somebody's situation to actually a compassionate feeling. And compassionate, for me, different from empathy, is that you can listen and you can understand from, you can put yourself in their position, but crucially you can actually do something to help them. You can empower them. I don't want people to become reliant on me. That is not my aim. I became reliant on others early on in this process, and it takes away your power completely. Everybody can heal themselves. Everybody has it within them. You can heal your own hurt. You can heal your own grief and your anger. I've got a real heat in my back now. Somebody's standing right behind me. In fact, there's a lot of, oh gosh, okay. There's like I call them my theatre group. Because they all appear when they're needed. So we can all heal our own grief. It's not an easy option, but I think, as I've sort of said before, I think we have a responsibility for ourselves, our children, how we deal with, I often think of a very high profile missing person who's in the news as well now again, and I always think of those siblings and how they've grown up under the glare of the public life, and how having a missing sister has affected them. And I just hope, I don't know, maybe I'd like to meet them one day. I don't know how old they are now, but probably not very old still. But I know from, when you have a sibling that dies or goes missing, it kind of, they are your closest genetic being. You both came from the same womb, and genetically you are the closest to anybody in this world, physical world, obviously. And the kind of effects of losing a sibling, you don't lose them because you never lose them. I hate that word. I hate that you lose them. You don't. You're still connected to them. You just need to redial the dial. But the bond is maybe contorted. Let's say that. But it affects further down the line. If your contemporaries everything you go through in life, they're not there physically. So, you have children, you get married, you have different relationship with your parents. Christian was my only sibling, so now I'm like the only child in the physical. All these things, you miss out on. You think of all the cousins my kids could have had. You think of brothers and sisters-in-law. You think of aunt and uncle. All these things. It's like it's not just what you lose as children. It's like it expands massively as you get older. And I can talk about all this now without being in floods of tears, but I never could. That's part of the healing process. In that, I know now Christian's very much with the kids. I have, his friends. There's quite a few of them who've kind of really rallied round, and I almost feel like our brothers and sisters-in-law in that kind of relationship. So I don't feel now that I've lost. I don't feel like I have that longing that I've been abandoned, that I'm missing out. In fact, quite the opposite. My life is incredibly rich now. Incredibly rich. And I guess part of the story and telling the story is letting people know this about me. You come from like a real crushing grief that you don't even know how to cope with. You don't even know where to begin. Like with Christian, he was missing he was like missing without a trace for, when did I find him? 2018, so 15 years. I didn't know how to deal with this for 15 years. And I should say now, it's never too late to heal a grief like that. It's never too late to heal grief. And I don't know. I just know that I have to keep talking and I have to keep sharing this story, because it's going to touch people, and they're going to think, oh my God, that's me. And I can actually do something about this. And I can take control of it. And I can't let it affect me negatively anymore. I think that's all I have to say today. I think we've got it all out. Sorry, I write, so the process is I write in the morning at about 10 o'clock or 10:15, and I write, and I get prompts from the course I'm doing, and it triggers things in me, and then I sit with Christian and we write, and what I then say is a collection of everything that's kind of come up in the morning, and I don't know what I'm going to say when I press live or go live, but it all just flows out, and that's how it always works. And I have faith and I have trust in that. And a lot of this is about moving from hope to a trust to then a faith. And I feel very sure that I have my theatre group around me, and it's got to come out. So lots of love, and I'll see you tomorrow morning for day 11. Goodness knows what that's going to bring up, but I hope something has touched you and given you some comfort or some thought or a little prod. Okay, lots of love. See you tomorrow. Bye.